Jonathan stared at the woman across the ballroom and felt his world collapse. Not because Dr. Amelia Washington was beautiful and brilliant and everything he'd never deserved, but because she was the woman he'd left dying on Michigan Avenue 3 years ago, and she had no idea she was falling in love with the man who'd nearly killed her. Now, before we continue this story, please click the subscribe button, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're listening from. Now let's begin. The grand ballroom buzzed with Chicago's wealthiest people pretending to care about charity while showing off their designer gowns and checking stock prices on their phones. Jonathan Hayes stood near the silent auction table, not seeing any of the art or jewelry up for bid. All he could see was her. Dr. Amelia Washington moved through the crowd like she belonged there, which she absolutely did. Confident, graceful, wearing a silver dress that sparkled when she laughed at something her colleague said. She looked nothing like the broken woman he'd been searching for, but he knew those eyes. Even 3 years later, even in this completely different setting, he'd recognize those eyes anywhere. They were the same eyes that had looked up at him from the rain-soaked pavement after his car hit her. The same eyes that had pleaded with him not to leave as he'd stood frozen, keys in his hand, deciding between calling 911 and running. He'd run. What happens when you spend years trying to make up for the worst thing you've ever done, only to discover you're about to make it worse? Jonathan's best friend Trevor appeared at his elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like you've seen a ghost, man. What's wrong?" "Nothing, just tired." "Right. That's why you've been staring at Dr. Washington for the past 10 minutes like she holds the secrets to the universe." Jonathan forced himself to look away. "I wasn't staring." "Dude, everyone's noticed, including her." Trevor grinned. "You should go talk to her. I heard she's single." Single. Jonathan's heart did something complicated. For 3 years he'd hired private investigators to track down the woman from the accident. Not to stalk her, to help her. Anonymous donations to pay her medical bills, funding for the free clinic where she'd volunteered during medical school, scholarships in her name. He'd never intended to meet her face to face. But 6 months ago, his investigator had sent a photo from her medical school graduation. Dr. Amelia Washington, pediatric surgery resident. The same woman he'd spent sleepless nights wondering about, worrying about, feeling guilty about. Except in that photo, she was smiling. Really, truly smiling in a way that made Jonathan realize she'd not only survived what he'd done to her, she'd thrived. "I don't think that's a good idea," Jonathan said. "Why not? You're rich, you're decent looking, and she's obviously brilliant. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen was that she'd find out who he was, what he'd done. That every good thing in her life over the past 3 years had been funded by the man who'd nearly killed her. Jonathan Hayes? He turned, and there she was. Dr. Amelia Washington, extending her hand with a smile that made his chest tight with guilt and longing and terror. "Dr. Washington, yes, hi. I heard you donated the new MRI machine to Children's Hospital. That machine has already saved 3 kids' lives." She was thanking him. The woman whose life he'd destroyed was thanking him for a donation that was a drop in the bucket compared to what he owed her. "It was nothing," he managed. "That machine cost $2 million. And the anonymous funding for our new pediatric wing? That was you too, wasn't it?" Jonathan felt sweat gathering at his collar. I believe in supporting good causes." "Well, your support means everything to families like the Johnsons. Their 6-year-old daughter needed emergency brain surgery last month. Without that MRI, we might not have caught her tumor in time." She was talking about saving children's lives with his money. Money he'd earned through the same reckless privilege that had nearly killed her. The irony was suffocating. "I'm glad it helped," he said quietly. "You know, most major donors want recognition. Photo ops, naming rights, that sort of thing. But you've been completely anonymous. Why? Because I'm trying to buy forgiveness for nearly murdering you, Jonathan thought. Because I wake up every night remembering the sound my car made when it hit you. Because I'm a coward who's been hiding behind money instead of facing what I did. I prefer to keep my charitable work private, he said instead. Amelia studied his face with the analytical attention he imagined she brought to surgery. That's refreshing. Most people in your position want the whole world to know how generous they are. I'm not most people. No, she said softly. I don't think you are. The way she looked at him, like she was seeing something good in him, made Jonathan want to disappear. She was looking for decency in a man who'd left her to die. Would you like to dance? He heard himself ask. I'd love to. As they moved onto the dance floor, Jonathan tried to memorize everything about this moment. The way she felt in his arms. The way she smelled like vanilla and something medical clean that was probably hand sanitizer. The way she looked at him like he might be worth her time. Because once she found out who he really was, she'd never look at him like this again. Can I ask you something? Amelia said as they swayed to the orchestra. Of course. Why pediatric surgery? You could fund anything. Cancer research, heart disease, AIDS, why kids? Jonathan's throat went dry. Because you told my investigator that children deserve better than what you got as a kid. Because you grew up in foster care and you understand what it means to be helpless and abandoned. Because I abandoned you too. Children are innocent, he said finally. They deserve every chance we can give them. Amelia's expression softened. You really mean that? I do. Then we have something in common. I became a surgeon because I know what it's like to be broken and need someone to put you back together. Jonathan's heart stopped. What do you mean? I was in an accident a few years ago. Car accident, nearly died. Her voice was matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. Spent months in physical therapy, had to relearn how to walk. It changed my perspective on a lot of things. I'm sorry, Jonathan whispered, the words nowhere near enough. Don't be. It made me stronger. Made me realize I wanted to help other people fight their way back from impossible situations. She was talking about the accident like it was a gift. Like nearly dying had been some kind of blessing that led her to her calling. Jonathan felt sick. The person who hit you, he said carefully. Did they ever find them? No, they drove off, left me there. Amelia's voice stayed steady, but Jonathan saw something flicker in her eyes. Pain that she'd learned to carry quietly. That must have been hard, not knowing why they left. I used to be angry about it, but I've made peace with it. Maybe they were scared, maybe they panicked. People do terrible things when they're afraid. She was giving him the benefit of the doubt. Even now, even talking about the worst night of her life, she was trying to understand why someone would leave her bleeding in the rain. What if you saw them again? Jonathan asked. What would you do? Amelia considered this seriously. I'd probably thank them. Thank them? That accident changed my life for the better. I was heading down a path that wasn't right for me. Partying too much, not taking care of myself, not using my brain for anything meaningful. The recovery process taught me what I was really capable of. Jonathan stared at her. You'd thank the person who nearly killed you? They didn't mean to nearly kill me. It was an accident. And besides, she smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through clouds. If it hadn't happened, I might never have become a doctor. I definitely wouldn't be here tonight, dancing with a mysterious billionaire who saves children's lives in his spare time. The song ended, but neither of them moved. Jonathan knew he should walk away, should excuse himself and never see her again, should let her live her beautiful life without the contamination of his presence. Instead, he heard himself say, Would you like to have dinner sometime? Amelia's smile could have powered the whole ballroom. I thought you'd never ask. 3 months later, Jonathan was completely, hopelessly, devastatingly in love. They had dinner every Tuesday, coffee on Saturday mornings, long walks through Millennium Park, where Amelia told him stories about her patients, and Jonathan pretended his heart wasn't breaking every time she mentioned how much good his anonymous donations were doing. She was everything he'd never known he wanted. Smart enough to challenge him, kind enough to see past his money to whatever decent parts of him still existed, strong enough to have survived what he'd done to her and become something beautiful. And she had no idea who he really was. "I have something to tell you," Amelia said over dinner at their usual restaurant. A little Italian place in her neighborhood, nothing fancy, the kind of place where they knew your order and asked about your day. Jonathan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "What is it?" "I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hit him like a physical blow. She was falling in love with him. With Jonathan Hayes, mysterious philanthropist and Tuesday dinner companion. Not with the man who'd left her broken on a rainy street. "Amelia, I know it's scary. I know you have walls up and I don't know everything about your past. But I know your heart. I see how you care about people you've never met. I see how you listen when I talk about work, how you remember the names of kids I'm treating. What do you do when someone loves the version of you that you wish you were but isn't who you actually are?" "You don't really know me," Jonathan said quietly. "Then tell me. Whatever it is, I can handle it." No, she couldn't. She could handle a lot. She'd survived being nearly killed and turned it into motivation to save other people's lives, but she couldn't handle falling in love with her would-be killer. "Jonathan, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" He looked at her across the table. Really looked at her. The scar along her hairline that she covered with makeup, but that he could see in the right light. The way she favored her left leg when she was tired. The slight tremor in her right hand when she was nervous. All evidence of what he'd done to her. "I care about you too," he said instead of the truth. "More than I should." "Why more than you should?" "Because I don't deserve you." Amelia reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were soft but strong. Surgeon's hands that had learned to be steady after being shattered. "Jonathan, whatever you think you've done, whatever guilt you're carrying around, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is who you are now, and the man I know now is good." Good. She thought he was good. What if I told you I'd done something terrible? Something unforgivable? Then I'd ask if you were sorry for it. Every day. And I'd ask if you'd tried to make it right. I've tried, but I don't think it's possible to make something like this right. Amelia squeezed his hand. "Jonathan, look at me." He met her eyes. Those same eyes that had looked up at him from the pavement 3 years ago. "I don't know what you did, but I know who you are. You're the man who funded a new children's wing because you believe kids deserve better. You're the man who remembers that I like extra foam in my latte, and that my patient Maria is scared of the dark, so you sent a donation specifically for nightlights in the pediatric ward." She was killing him with kindness, with proof that he wasn't completely evil, even though the worst thing he'd ever done was sitting right in front of him holding his hand. "You're the man who won't even tell me how much money you've donated because you don't want credit for it. That's not the behavior of someone unforgivable." "Amelia, what if—" He struggled to find words that wouldn't give everything away. "What if someone hurt you badly, and then they tried to make up for it by helping you, but they never told you who they were? Like the person who hit me?" Jonathan's blood turned to ice. "What?" "Well, I never told you this, but someone's been paying my medical bills anonymously, and funding my student loans, and making donations to every hospital where I've worked." She tilted her head, studying his face. "I've always wondered if it was the person who hit me, trying to make amends." The room was spinning. "How would you feel about that?" "Grateful, I guess. It would mean they weren't just some heartless person who left me to die. It would mean they cared enough to try to help. But they still left you there. People make mistakes when they're scared. What matters is what they do afterward." Jonathan felt tears burning behind his eyes. She was forgiving him without even knowing it. She was giving him permission to keep lying to her because she was too good to imagine that someone could look her in the eye and deceive her this completely. "I love you too," he said, hating himself for it. Amelia's smile lit up the entire restaurant. Really? Really. She leaned across the table and kissed him, and Jonathan kissed her back while his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. He was in love with the woman whose life he'd destroyed. She was in love with a man who didn't exist, and every day he didn't tell her the truth, he was destroying them both all over again. But he couldn't stop. He was too selfish, too addicted to the way she looked at him like he was worth saving, even though they both knew better. 6 months later, they were talking about moving in together. Jonathan had never lived with anyone before, never wanted to. His penthouse was perfect for one person, clean, quiet, no evidence of the messy reality of caring about other people. But Amelia made him want messy, made him want her coffee cups in his sink and her medical journals on his nightstand and her terrible singing in his shower. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, looking around his living room like she was trying to imagine her stuff mixed in with his expensive, impersonal furniture. "I'm sure. It's a big step. We've only been together 8 months. 8 months of living a lie. 8 months of falling deeper in love while drowning in guilt. 8 months of watching Amelia trust him more every day while knowing he was betraying that trust just by breathing." "I know it's fast," Jonathan said, "but I've never felt this way about anyone." Neither have I. They were standing by his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was the intersection where he'd hit her, the hospital where she'd fought for her life, the apartment where she'd learned to walk again. All places that existed because of him, in her world because of him, but she didn't know that. "Jonathan, can I ask you something?" "Always." "The night we met, at the charity gala, you looked at me like you'd seen a ghost. Why?" His throat went dry. "What do you mean?" "Your friend Trevor said you'd been staring at me for 10 minutes before you came over. Like you already knew me somehow. What happens when the person you love starts asking questions you can't answer without destroying everything?" "You reminded me of someone," Jonathan said carefully. "Who?" "Someone I used to know. Someone I lost." It wasn't technically a lie. He had lost the version of Amelia who existed before the accident, the woman she might have been if he hadn't changed her life trajectory with his car. "Oh." Amelia's expression softened. "I'm sorry. That must have been painful." "It was. Do you want to talk about it?" No. He wanted to pretend they'd met in some innocent way, wanted to pretend he deserved her love instead of having to steal it through deception. "Maybe someday," he said. "You know, I've been thinking about something lately." "What's that?" "The accident. The person who hit me. I told you I'd made peace with it, but..." Jonathan's heart started pounding. "But what?" "But I keep wondering if I know them. If maybe there's someone in my life now, trying to make up for what happened." "Why would you think that?" "The timing of things. The anonymous donation started right after the accident. Someone's been taking care of me from a distance for 3 years, and it has to be someone with serious money." She looked at him meaningfully. "Someone like you." Jonathan felt the walls of his carefully constructed lie crumbling around him. "Amelia, I'm not accusing you of anything, but if it was you, if you were the one who hit me and you've been trying to make it right, I need you to know that I understand." She was giving him an opening, a chance to confess and be forgiven, a way out of the deception that was eating him alive. But confessing would mean losing her, and Jonathan had learned that he was too selfish to choose her happiness over his own. "It wasn't me," he lied. The words hung in the air between them. "Okay," Amelia said finally. "I believe you." But something in her voice had changed. For the first time since he'd known her, she sounded uncertain, like maybe she wasn't sure she could trust him completely. "Amelia, it's fine. I guess I thought if it was someone I cared about, it would make sense. Why they never came forward. Why they've been taking care of me from a distance. Maybe it's just someone who heard about your case and wanted to help." Maybe. But she didn't sound convinced. and Jonathan realized that his direct lie had done more damage than all his half-truths combined. She was starting to doubt him, starting to wonder if the man she loved was capable of looking her in the eye and lying about something this important, which of course he was. That night, as they lay in bed together, Amelia was quieter than usual. "Are you okay?" Jonathan asked. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About trust. About how well we really know the people we love." Jonathan's chest tightened. "You can trust me, Amelia." "Can I?" "What do you mean?" She turned to face him in the dark. "I mean, are there things about you that would change how I feel? Things you're not telling me?" Yes, Jonathan thought. The biggest thing. The thing that would destroy us both. "Everyone has things they're not proud of," he said instead. "That's not what I asked." "Amelia, why are you pushing this? Because I'm falling deeper in love with you every day, and I have this feeling that you're holding something back, something big." She was right. She was always right. It's what made her such a good doctor. She could diagnose problems that other people missed. "What if I am?" Jonathan asked quietly. "What if there's something about me that would hurt you to know?" "Then I'd want you to tell me anyway, because lies hurt worse than truth." No, they didn't. Jonathan knew for certain that the truth would hurt worse than anything he could imagine. "I need time," he said. "Time for what?" "To figure out how to tell you something without losing you." Amelia was quiet for a long moment. "Jonathan, if you don't tell me soon, you're going to lose me anyway." The newspaper article appeared on a Tuesday morning. Jonathan was making coffee when his phone buzzed with a news alert. 3-year investigation reveals identity of hit-and-run driver in Dr. Washington case. His hands started shaking so badly he dropped the phone. No, 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 no. This wasn't supposed to happen. He'd paid people to make sure it wouldn't happen. He'd covered his tracks, had the best lawyers money could buy, made sure there was no evidence connecting him to that night. He picked up the phone and read the article with growing horror. Sources close to the investigation report that new traffic camera footage has identified tech billionaire Jonathan Hayes as the driver who struck Dr. Amelia Washington 3 years ago and fled the scene. Hayes has not responded to requests for comment. The story detailed everything: his involvement in the accident, the cover-up, the anonymous donations that had followed. Even his current relationship with Amelia, described as the victim who unknowingly fell in love with her would-be killer. Jonathan's chest felt like it was collapsing. Amelia would see this. Probably already had seen it. Her colleagues, her friends, everyone in her life would know that she'd been sleeping with the man who'd nearly killed her. His phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. Probably reporters. He turned it off. Then he heard the key in his lock. Amelia walked in carrying her overnight bag and the newspaper. Her face was completely blank. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. Jonathan looked at the woman he loved more than his own life and knew there was no point in lying anymore. "Yes." "What happens when the worst moment of your life collides with the best thing that ever happened to you?" Amelia set down her bag very carefully. 3 years. You've known for 3 years who I was, and you never said anything." "Amelia, please let me explain." "Explain what? That you left me bleeding in the rain? That you watched me struggle through recovery while pretending to be some anonymous benefactor? That you let me fall in love with you while lying about the most important thing that ever happened to me? I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Which part? The part where you hit me with your car, or the part where you made me fall in love with you?" Jonathan had never seen her angry before, even in the emergency room with difficult families. Even when dealing with insurance companies, she always kept her cool. But now she was furious and hurt, and looking at him like he was a stranger. "Both," he said honestly. "I was drunk that night. I was stupid and reckless and young, and I panicked. I've regretted it every day since. But not enough to turn yourself in, not enough to tell me the truth. I was scared." "Of what? Losing your money? Your reputation?" "Of losing you." Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. You never had me, Jonathan. You had some woman who was in love with a fiction. Someone you made up. That's not true. The man you fell in love with, that's who I really am. The donations, the way I feel about you wanting to be better, that's all real. Built on a lie. Built on guilt that turned into something real. How do I know the difference? How do I know anything you've ever said to me was true? Jonathan took a step toward her, but she moved away. Don't come near me. Amelia, please. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you don't get to ask for forgiveness. You don't get to make this about what you need. She was right. Even now, even facing the consequences of his lies, he was being selfish. What you did to me that night was bad enough, Amelia continued. But what you did to me for the past year, making me love you while knowing what you'd taken from me, that's unforgivable. I never meant to hurt you. You hurt me every day. Every time you kissed me, every time you said you loved me, every time you let me trust you, every single day was another betrayal. Tears were streaming down her face now, and Jonathan wanted to comfort her, but knew he'd lost the right. The worst part is, I can see why you did it. I can see how it started as guilt and became something else. I can see that you really do love me. I do love you, more than anything. I know. And that makes it worse because it means you knew exactly how much you were going to hurt me, and you did it anyway. Jonathan felt his heart breaking into pieces that would never fit back together. What happens now? Now you leave me alone. You stop funding my work. You stop trying to take care of me. You stop existing in my world. Amelia, no, I mean it. Whatever guilt you feel, whatever debt you think you owe me, consider it paid. I never want to see you again. She picked up her bag and headed for the door. I'm sorry, Jonathan called after her. I'm so sorry. She paused at the door. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix this. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing you can do. That's the point. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Jonathan stood in his empty apartment, surrounded by the silence he'd lived with before Amelia had brought love and light and laughter into his life. He'd lost her. He'd finally told the truth, and he'd lost her anyway. But for the first time in 3 years, the guilt wasn't eating him alive. Because finally, she knew who he really was. And she was strong enough to walk away from him, just like she'd been strong enough to survive everything else he'd done to her. 2 years later, Jonathan sat in a courtroom listening to his sentence: vehicular assault, leaving the scene of an accident, obstruction of justice. The charges had multiplied once the investigation really got going, once they'd uncovered all the ways he'd used his money and influence to avoid consequences. 5 years in federal prison, the judge announced, with eligibility for parole in 3 years. Jonathan nodded. It seemed fair. More than fair, considering what he'd done. His lawyer leaned over to whisper about appeals, but Jonathan shook his head. He was done running from this. In the gallery behind him, he could hear his parents crying. They'd stood by him through the trial, hired the best legal team money could buy, begged him to let them fix this the way they'd fixed everything else in his life. But Jonathan was tired of being fixed, tired of having his problems disappear because of who his family was. He turned around to look at the courtroom one more time before they led him away. And there, in the back row, was Amelia. She wasn't looking at him with hatred anymore. She looked sad, like she was mourning something that might have been beautiful if it hadn't been built on lies. Their eyes met for just a second. She nodded slightly, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that this was the right ending to their story. Then she left and Jonathan let them put the handcuffs on him. Prison wasn't as bad as he'd expected, maybe because he'd been living in a prison of his own guilt for years already. He worked in the library, read everything he could get his hands on, started a correspondence course in social work, thinking maybe when he got out he could find a way to help people that didn't involve money or power or influence. Just showing up and doing the work. He got letters sometimes, updates on the children's hospital wing he'd funded, photos of kids who'd been helped by the MRI machine, thank you notes from families whose lives had been saved by equipment his money had bought. He never got letters from Amelia. Didn't expect to. But sometimes he'd see articles about her work, new surgeries she'd pioneered, awards she'd won. She was thriving without him, had thrived despite him. 18 months into his sentence, his cellmate asked him what he was going to do when he got out. Start over, Jonathan said. Find a way to help people that doesn't involve trying to buy forgiveness. You think that's possible? Starting over? Jonathan thought about Amelia, how she'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into motivation to save other people's lives. How she'd forgiven the person who'd hurt her before she even knew who they were. Yeah, he said. I think it's possible. When he was released after serving 3 years, Jonathan moved to a small town in Oregon. Got a job at a nonprofit that helped families navigate the foster care system. Lived in a tiny apartment above a coffee shop. Rode his bike to work. No one there knew who he was or what he'd done. He was just Jonathan, the guy who was good at paperwork and didn't mind working weekends. It was the first honest life he'd ever lived. 5 years after the trial, he was reading the newspaper when he saw the announcement. Dr. Amelia Washington was getting married to Dr. James Mitchell, a fellow pediatric surgeon. The article mentioned that they'd met while working together on a medical mission to Haiti. Jonathan smiled, really smiled for the first time in years. She'd found someone good, someone who could love her for who she was without carrying the weight of having hurt her, someone who could give her the life she deserved. He cut out the announcement and put it in the box where he kept reminders of who he used to be and who he was trying to become. Then he went to work, where 3 new foster families were waiting for help navigating the system that was supposed to protect kids but sometimes failed them. It wasn't glamorous work. It didn't make headlines or get him invited to charity galas. But it was real work, helping real people, without any hidden agendas or guilty motives. It was the life Amelia had unknowingly taught him he wanted. A life where he showed up not because he owed someone something, but because showing up was the right thing to do. He'd never see her again. Would never get to tell her that loving her had saved him, even though losing her had broken him. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the best thing he could do for her was live the kind of life that proved her faith in human goodness hadn't been completely misplaced, even if he'd spent 3 years proving exactly the opposite. Jonathan folded up the newspaper and got back to work. There were kids who needed help, and he had time to give. It wasn't enough to make up for what he'd done, but it was a start. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.